like. Well, welcome to Oaks Christian Online School's first webinar for this school year. And this is the beginning of webinars for our Online Christian Consortium as well. So I want to make sure that we'll be around to answer questions for people afterwards if you have questions about the consortium. Matt may not have too many this time since you know us well already. But before I do that, I want to make sure that I introduce to you Samantha Farinacci. So Samantha is our spiritual life advisor for Oaks Christian Online School. She has written more than 9 courses for us. So Matt, the courses that you have looked at, Samantha was responsible for the content in those courses. She also teaches Bible and teaches spiritual life advisory courses to our full-time online students as well as blended students from our main campus and from other schools. And she's just been a huge blessing to our faculty and to our staff and to the students, because she's also a huge person for discipling our young people. So I'm very excited for you to see what theological engagement means for Oaks Christian Online School, and for how we develop courses and for how we teach and how we think about things. So Samantha, go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Vicki. I'm just going to open us in a quick word of prayer, and then we will officially begin. God, I just thank you so much for each person here and each person watching this recording. I thank you for the passion that they have for education and for students. And we just pray that you would be glorified in our sharing of ideas. All these things we pray in your name. Amen. All right, hello again. It's great to see all of you here. I want to go ahead and begin our presentation with a overview of our mission statement. In nearly everything that we do here at Oaks Online, we try to anchor that work in our mission. And so we read it and reread it regularly, and most of us can recite it from memory because we see our work here as deeply connected to this mission. In particular today, we're going to kind of focus on the bookends of this statement, the things that sort of ground the work that we do here, which is that we dedicate ourselves to Christ in the pursuit of academic excellence, artistic expression, and athletic distinction. And we do all of this while growing in knowledge and wisdom through God's abundant grace. And so what we have had to do at Oaks Online is to take this mission statement, which predates us. It comes from our main campus. And we've had to think about, how do we take this mission and bring it to an online context? And it has caused us to ask some really interesting questions and to come up with some really kind of, I think, meaningful work that we've been able to do here. And one of the things that's been really rewarding for me personally in hearing from students and faculty in particular is they will often come to us at Oaks Online and say, wow, things are really different here. And that word here is really important to me because what it tells me is that we've been able to take this mission and actually create a culture, even in an online context, that speaks to this mission, that it's pungent enough for people to have a sense of our here, to have a sense of our culture, to have a sense of our personality, our sort of the quality that makes us unique as a school. And so I wanted to share with you a little bit this afternoon about how we do that, in particular, the Christian dimension to that, how we make a Christian here, how we create this kind of Christian culture and preserve it so that our students and our faculty can experience it. There are 2 voices that students will experience when they enroll in our online school, and I'm being particular about the use of the word voice here because voice is a relational word and something that we are very particular about in living out the Christian mission of this school is that our classes be relational. We know from studying pedagogy that that's necessary for good learning, but we also see that as important for living out our Christian mission as well, that all of our educational interactions with students and with faculty are always grounded in genuine and authentic relationships. And so even the classes themselves, though they are in an online setting, we want to make sure that that relational dimension is always coming across. And so there are two distinct voices that students are experiencing when they enroll in courses here at Oaks Online. The first is a voice coming from the course. We have courses that are created through an extensive process, which you guys can hear about if you tune into a future webinar. But one of the parts that we one of the pieces of creating these courses is the theological engagement, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So that's the first voice that students experience that's exemplifying this Christian mission, is the theological engagement in their courses. The second voice that students are experiencing is, of course, the personal voice of the teacher, the instructor. And that really speaks to our Christian pedagogy. In other words, what's unique about Christian teaching? What makes it Christian? Those are the two voices that students really encounter, and we want to make sure that they are experiencing these voices in every single class that they take, whether it be math or history or any other class. I will add as a side note that students are also required to take 4 semesters of Bible and 4 years of spiritual life. So of course they encounter the Christian mission in that more kind of obvious way, but I wanted to speak in particular today about these two voices that span the width of our curriculum, not just only the Bible and spiritual life department. And Matt, I see that you have a question, and I would love to answer it. If you don't mind, I might just save it till the end. So at Oaks, we do require that every course be theologically engaged. And I want to give you a snippet from our training on how SMEs can do that. Now, an SME is a subject matter expert, which is a course writer, someone who is writing our courses. Good afternoon, Cassandra. I see that you've joined us. Thank you so much for coming. We're just beginning to talk about our courses and how they are theologically engaged. And we're just beginning to discuss our subject matter experts. So subject matter experts are people who write courses, and they go through an extensive process, both in how they are hired and also in how they are trained. And a couple of the units in the training are dedicated specifically to how to create theological engagement in courses. The reason that this is so necessary is for 2 reasons. One is because, of course, not every person who is an expert in their subject has had a chance to actually think about the bigger and broader theological dimensions to their subject. And so we want to make sure that our subject matter experts have an opportunity to do that, to actually learn what that's like. The second thing that we really want to make sure that subject matter experts are able to experience in the training is a personal relationship, again, with real people who run this training from our school, because it's very important to us that they not only know how to theologically engage a Christian course in general, but to engage a course theologically with the specific culture that we have created here at Oaks Online. And so it's really important for our subject matter experts to be able to learn about theological engagement in general, but also to learn about how we do it here in particular. Even this term theological engagement is somewhat unique to us. I don't claim to know about every single school in the world, but so far I have not actually seen this term used elsewhere. And so it's very important that our SMEs understand kind of the uniqueness of the Christian culture that we've tried to create for students here. So this is a snippet from our training. It's much longer than this, of course, but I just wanted you to get a piece of what it sounds like. So it says, at Oaks, we want students to not only excel in and participate fully with each subject individually, but also to be encouraged to think deeply about what holds all knowledge together. And so what we see here is two things. First, that we really want students to experience the rigor of their subject. And then the second is that we also want them to experience their subject in a broader context. So sometimes in secular environments, students might learn each of the subjects that you encounter in a typical school setting, but they aren't encouraged to think broadly about them, to think about the deeper and kind of bigger truths that emerge from a wider study of those subjects. And so our theological engagement is designed to help students to be able to do just that. Now, this is our theological engagement statement, and when we send you this recording, we'll send you this in a single document so that you can read it in a more readable format. But I just wanted to give you a couple of highlights of this statement so that you can kind of get a feel for the kind of philosophical standpoint that we have on this issue. So if you'll follow me with the text that's in brown that's highlighted for you, we intentionally design our courses to exhibit theological engagement that enhances rather than jeopardizes the academic freedom of our educational institution, meaning the courses attempt to reflect the most credible research available while also providing meaningful reflection on a subject's purpose and intrinsic value. Can everyone hear me okay? Let me just check. Let me take a quick moment. If you can type in your chat no, that would be great. Looks like a couple of you are able to hear me. Let me just wait a moment to hopefully hear from some more of you. Okay, great. Then I'll go ahead and continue. I'll just read this portion again in case it cut out. We intentionally design our courses to exhibit theological engagement that enhances rather than jeopardizes the academic freedom of our educational institution, meaning the courses attempt to reflect the most credible research available while also providing meaningful reflection on a subject's purpose and intrinsic value. So there's a lot there, but I want to unpack it a bit here for us now. This references academic freedom. And academic freedom is a phrase commonly used in higher education in college and university settings. And it's a term that is used to protect the integrity of each of the disciplines. So faculty members at certain universities are often expected to sign academic freedom documents. I experienced this firsthand when I taught at a community college where I had to sign an academic freedom document that proved and where I kind of was able to demonstrate and authenticate the fact that I was never pressured to stifle or limit the research and the breadth of my subject. In other words, this is how colleges and universities protect faculty's ability to provide the best research and the best content that they have access to, and that their administration isn't kind of stifling that broad pursuit. And something that Christian schools, quite honestly, have been criticized for in our time is for limiting academic freedom. This is a common complaint that Christian schools receive, that by creating courses that have theological engagement, that have a Christian perspective within them, that somehow that is a limitation or a stifling of this kind of wide and open search for the best content that's out there about any particular subject, again, whether that be algebra or European history or any other subject. And so we actually take that challenge very seriously. And again, Chrissy will talk to you in the future about how our courses go through an extensive process to make sure that the academic freedom of our classes is highly protected and guarded. But even the particular part where SMEs, again, subject matter experts, course writers, are trained in how to theologically engage, we actually address this very topic in the training so that our subject matter experts understand understand that the particular theological engagement that we are interested in at Oaks Christian Online is the kind that actually not only does not stifle the academic freedom of each of the subjects, but we would argue actually liberates the subjects even further. In other words, that by understanding each of these disciplines from this perspective, that actually gives them more terrain and more ground as opposed to less. And so I want to give you kind of some ideas about how we think about this fact. And so again, highlighting in brown here, our theological engagement helps students to explore the broader truths and meanings behind, beside, and beneath what they are learning. So this is an example of how we see the theological engagement pushing students even further into a discipline as opposed to pulling them away or sheltering them from the best kind of research and the best understanding that's out there about any given discipline. We really kind of make sure that any theological engagement is moving students deeper and wider as opposed to narrowing in an unhelpful way. And we'll give you an example of that in the next moment here. So there are 4 areas of theological engagement that we ask our courses to reflect. This first one is humble excellence, where we ask that our courses, instead of teaching knowledge as an opportunity to gain power in a sort of oppressive sense, that instead that our courses model and encourage gentleness and generosity through the witness of a God that stepped down from his heavenly realm in order to live ordinarily among us as Jesus Christ. So what that's basically saying is that instead of teaching students in a way that quite honestly puffs them up, we are trying to teach each of these subjects with humility, both for the discipline and then for the lifelong learning that follows that study of that discipline. So we want students that through learning algebra and through learning European history and through learning English literature are able to actually take that and see it as an opportunity for service as opposed to just kind of self-aggrandizement. And so that's something that we really take seriously in our courses, and we try to present them in that way that students can, again, be humble, both in just reverence for the bigness of the ideas that they're encountering, but also then in how they apply those ideas in their own lives. The second thing that we really care about is thoughtful self-critique. So this is a less known, I would say, reality of the Judeo-Christian scriptures. So speaking about the Bible here, is that the Bible, one of the marks of it as a historical document is its ability to self-critique. So most historical documents, particularly ancient ones, speak mostly about the winners, and they kind of shy over or kind of cover over the weaknesses or the shortcomings of their own people. But the Bible is unique in that its people are not afraid to challenge its own presuppositions. This happens all throughout the scriptures. We don't have enough time to give every example now, but there are countless times where the people that the Bible will ultimately consider to be good or heroic make mistakes and revise their original ideas. And so we follow suit. We kind of copy that model and try to provide ample space for students to be able to question and dispute worldviews that emerge from each discipline. And again, it's because of this view of scripture, because of these scriptures that we hold to be authoritative, that we can kind of validate this self-critiquing model that our courses represent. The third piece here is sincerity and empathy, and this kind of goes hand in hand with humble excellence, which is that we are asking our students to consciously be aware of the fact that when they are learning, they are putting on the mind of someone else. So whether that be a poet or a philosopher or a historian, they're actually stepping outside of themselves and are practicing the art of empathy. And this is something that we see as a direct reflection of what Christ does when he empathizes. That's one of the things that we see all throughout the New Testament, is that Jesus was a man of compassion, that he actually would try to step into others' reality and experience. And that's really what we're asking students to do, is to kind of sometimes step out of themselves and step into the minds of others through their courses. The final element here is imaginative creativity. So we know that a lot of schools focus on critical thinking and creative thinking, but ours is nuanced a bit. And that's that we want students to be able to see that ideas fit in with a grand narrative. And we'll talk more about that later, but that students are encouraged to think beyond their own kind of obvious choices when it comes to circulating through different course content, and to actually find the beauty and the delight in the things that they're learning. And so we want for our courses to not only be thoughtful, but for them to be inspiring as well. And we often use the phrase lifelong learning because that's what we're hoping that we are beginning here. So I wanted to make sure that you saw an example of this since you were listening to it on such a philosophical level. Here's an example more on the ground. And so this is a sample from our marine biology course. And this is one incident of theological engagement in this course. So this is a discussion. If you haven't had a chance to look at our courses yet, discussions are forums where students receive a post, a prompt, and then they respond with an initial post, and then they respond to other classmates in either text format or in video format. So it's a chance for them to dialogue with each other and with their instructor. So this discussion reads, you just learned about the scientific method and how it has impacted the way we think about all sciences, but especially marine biology. Interestingly, this approach to thinking has shaped how we think about many other subjects as well, including psychology, anthropology, and even theology. What this means is that the emergence of the scientific method is actually changing how we understand human life and even the supernatural. Take a moment to look at this list of familiar things below and pretend that you are explaining each of them to someone who is only able to process information using the scientific method. In other words, the only way they will understand what these things are is if you use the scientific method to explain them. Write how you would explain each of these things using the scientific method: a bookshelf, a dog, generosity, prayer. When you have finished, answer these questions. How effective did you find the scientific method to be for explaining each of these things? What has this taught you about the advantages and disadvantages of using the scientific method to discover and relay truth? Now, if you read this carefully, and I'll let you guys do this as you listen to the recording, you'll see that there's actually lots of ways in which students are not only learning more about marine biology and more about the scientific method, but they're also learning more about how to develop their own sense of truth and their own sense of worldview of how to understand and view all things. And so as students are faced with this challenge, what they are going to be able to do is essentially encounter each of these 4 different areas of theological engagement as they work through this prompt. And in fact, what students we find end up experiencing is both the benefits of the scientific worldview and the scientific method, but also some of the limitations and the finitude involved in that ideology. And that's something that's really important to us at Oaks, is that students are able to, again, kind of try on these different worldviews and then to kind of see what they have to say about truth and what they're not able to perfectly communicate about truth. So now I want to kind of switch gears. So we're going to move outside of thinking about just our courses as they exist in the classes and move to a step beyond that to our Christian instructors. So specifically, we're going to be talking about 4 central convictions that drive our pedagogy. And that's really an important idea there, is that we let our convictions drive our pedagogy. And so you'll see here that first we begin with a conviction, and then we land on a pedagogical method or strategy or ideology. So again, we begin with our convictions, and then we let our pedagogy be an extension of that, so that the conviction roots or grounds our pedagogy, so that in everything that we do, we dedicate ourselves to Christ, as our mission statement articulated. So our first conviction here is that God is a triune God, and I won't go into this in too much detail, but the basic idea here is that God is one yet three and three yet one, so that God is three distinct and inseparable persons. And so in other words, that while there is only one God, we believe that God exists in a dynamic relationship. And so therefore we prioritize relationships. And this actually goes a lot farther than you might think on initial reading. There's so much put into our trainings and in our meetings about how to actually build meaningful relationships with students in an online setting. And we do that not just only for the educational benefits, but because we also think that it is good and right because of this kind of theological conviction. The second example comes to us about Christ in particular. We are a Christian school, and so Christ is a big part of our theology, obviously. And so what we see here is that when we study Christ, we see that this is God who came down in the flesh, who was willing to take on human skin and function as a servant for us. And so likewise, we ask that our teachers see their knowledge as an opportunity for service rather than for kind of lording it over their students. And so we put a lot, again, into our teacher trainings and just encouragements and reviews and different things in how teachers can really take their instruction and bring it to that kind of personal level where a student resides. The next example has to do with scripture. So we recognize both the Old and the New Testaments here at Oaks Christian, and we see them as the supreme voice on matters of faith. Now, what that does for our pedagogy is that it forces us in a good way to see everything that students are learning as being part of a grander story, as being part of a grander narrative that students can encounter as they learn these subjects. And so we challenge students to think about these different questions that are bigger and broader that emerge from a careful study of their subject. And finally, we have this sense of community. One of the distinctives of Christian theology is that the church, the community of Christians, is called the body of Christ, Christ's body. And the idea here is that we have hands and legs and eyes and ears, and that all of them are important in their own ways. And so we take this principle, this theology, and we apply it to our pedagogy in making sure that our instructors are providing active spaces and creative spaces where students can engage with each other, because we really believe that it's in that collaboration, it's in that fusion of gifts and talents and thoughts that students can learn their subject the most richly. And so those are the ways in which we think about Christian pedagogy, but here are some of the ways in which we actually pass that thinking along to our faculty and staff. Of course, to be on staff, to be employed at Oaks Christian, you do have to be a Christian, but you do not have to have any experience working in a Christian environment. And that's not something that we require in any way. And so we want to make sure that there's lots of opportunities for teachers and staff to be able to learn how to do this, how to really teach in this kind of uniquely Christian way. And so we do this in this list of ways. Of course, you guys are experiencing a webinar right now, so we do those for our teachers as well. In each of our meetings, we journey together through a common subject. This year, the subject happens to be surrender. So this entire year, our teachers and staff are focusing on this kind of Christian principle as we go through the year. And then there's other opportunities, trainings and live sessions and peer-to-peer mentorship where our teachers can kind of encounter this uniquely Christian pedagogy. I want to close by realizing that although this might have been useful, hopefully, to each of you in understanding our kind of philosophical mindset on this topic, that some of you might have more particular questions and more specific questions. And that's where I think the really fun part happens. And so I really hope that you guys don't mind sticking around for a couple of extra moments just to ask whatever questions are on your mind. Here are are a couple of areas where I thought that perhaps some of you might have some questions. The first one is if you'd just like to hear more about our Bible and spiritual life courses. If you just kind of want to know what those are like, we can talk about that. If you're curious about what online chaplaincy looks like, so how do we support students in their actual faith development here at the school? What about our interactions with parents? What does that look like? How do we do that in a Christian way? And then what about students who are not Christian? Perhaps you'd like to hear that a bit as well. Or if there's anything else that you guys are curious about. I know that there were some questions that appeared in the chat box, and so I'd love to hear those as well. If you don't mind, maybe Vicki, if you could direct my attention to those if possible. Thanks, Christy. You can also jump on mic if you'd rather ask your question through audio, or you can just type it in the chat box.
Matt had some great questions, Sam, about the teacher interaction. How much time did they have live with the teacher each week? So we answered back that it's a half an hour to 45 minutes per subject per teacher per week. And those are instructional based sessions, and often it really is the time for the teacher to show that personal side. But really the asynchronous time where they're responding to discussions and even responding to late work can be just as much an opportunity to show their understanding of these pedagogical terms as anything else. So that was one I remember, but any other questions you guys would like to ask this evening? I know it's late for you, Matt, but either you or Cassandra want to anything else for this evening? Okay, good. Well, I'm going to turn off the recording and then...
actually, Vicki, it looks like we do have one question here. Let me just take a look. So how do you handle students or parents with strong opinions on topics in the news or otherwise? Often these opinions that deal with religion can leave little room for discussion. That is a great question and very timely, actually. We have thought a lot about this for each of the years that we've been here, but this year in particular. So we, similar, I think, to a brick and mortar school, we handle each and every case differently because every case is unique. And so when we have a parent or a student that has introduced something that is complex, that's in the media or in the news, or is a part of a culture that is, let's say, in conflict or in tension with the culture that we've created here, then we really do it case by case. So to give you a couple of examples, this year already, we've had some very meaningful conversations with parents in a one-on-one context. And so we try to get FaceTime with parents and students on these topics. I think that's something that sometimes we, in an online setting, we default to. Our temptation is to default to just email or that kind of thing, but getting FaceTime on Skype or through another video format is really important to the sensitivity of those kind of topics. And so we actually create, we've had, again, just one-on-one meetings. We've also had times where we'll all create a video recording actually addressing a particular topic like video games or something like that, and then we'll kind of let parents and students view that and then engage and talk about that. So it's, again, always entrenched in relationship. That's really the big thing, is really being thoughtful about saying, hey, this is a real school and these are real parents and they have real questions, and we want to treat them with dignity and respect in interacting with them. Matt, I see your other question, and Vicki, feel free to add on to any of this too, asking how does your online chaplaincy work? Can you go further on this topic? Yes, so I actually have a quick slide on this, which we can talk about for just a moment. So we have this idea in Christianity of discipleship, that we are students of Christ, and that when we when we are in relationship with each other, that we can disciple each other, that we can build each other up. And so our online chaplaincy is really grounded in these three basic principles that I'll just talk about really briefly. So the first one is called non-reactive presence and redemptive listening. And this comes from a passage in James that talks about being quick to listen and slow to speak. This is important in any kind of chaplaincy context when you have students sharing with you about emotional or physical or spiritual difficulties or just even questions in their lives. It's really, really important to get very, very slow and very, very quiet so that the student or the parent or the faculty member, whoever it is, can share with you in their own words kind of what's happening and process with you in that way. Again, that's something that would be true in a brick and mortar setting in any kind of chaplaincy context, but it's, I think, magnified in an online culture because you have to be that much more careful that you're definitely understanding what the person is going through. And so, again, being very slow to speak and very quick to listen and very slow in your reaction. So that's what non-reactive presence speaks to. There's a common mistake that's sometimes made in an online culture in that we respond very quickly and we try to handle things in a very fast-paced way. But transformation and lives being changed and human development happens slowly. There's no substitute for time, right? And so it's really important in a chaplaincy culture online to resist that temptation to try to make change happen very quickly, but instead to be very slow and very methodical in your interactions. Yes, Cassandra, that's one of my favorite passages of all time. The next one is has to do with the technology. So I mentioned that I used to teach at a community college. One of the subjects that I taught there was English composition, so freshman English. It was a lot of fun, and I used to tell those students that when you're a beginning writer, that your goal when you're just starting out is to get to the point where your reader becomes totally unaware of your writing. Because as we all remember from being freshmen ourselves, we get really excited about the new vocabulary that we've learned or the new language that we've learned. And so we just kind of throw it in there in some awkward ways oftentimes, and it distracts readers from what is really meant to be communicated. Technology tends to work that way as well, where sometimes we get really excited about bells and whistles, and we tend to make our technology shine in a really glitzy way. But actually, for developing meaningful relationships, particularly in a chaplaincy context, we really want to try hard to make sure that the technology becomes almost invisible. And so we want it to be like a seamless interaction. And so there's a lot that goes into that, but it's really important that the technology becomes something that goes to the back of a student's mind or a faculty member's mind, as opposed to being constantly buzzing in the foreground of their mind, because that's how then the relationship can become in the foreground. The relationship can be then the actual thing that you're connecting over, as opposed to connecting over just technology. So there's a lot that goes into how slides are put together, how emails are written, all kinds of technological interactions. It's really important as a chaplain figure to make that technology invisible. The third piece is this sense of spurring each other on. This really speaks to community. So in a brick and mortar school, sometimes it's tempting, I think, for brick and mortar schools to be tempted to kind of replace different areas of life of a student's life, whether that be their family life or their friendship life. We almost try to be like a one-stop shop, if that makes sense, if you guys can relate to that at all. But what's really kind of empowering about being put in online culture is that I think we're always aware of the fact that it has to be a coming alongside, that we have to come alongside families, we have to come alongside their sports teams, their jobs. There's just this it's hard to explain. It would take too long to explain it, but that's just a really distinct mark of online education, is that you're just constantly aware of the fact that, yeah, we can't replace that community. And so we have to support and edify that community as opposed to trying to replace it. So a lot of our assignments in the spiritual life courses and in the Bible courses are really about helping students discover the assets that they already have in their current context. So I might have a student living in Texas or Tennessee or Uganda or Australia, and they're all really being given an opportunity to, through the assignments, to realize like, oh, I never knew that I had a pastor down my street who would love to talk to me. And oh, I never knew that my parents wanted to discuss this stuff with me. But because they're asked through assignments to do that, then they're really able to kind of get that support that they need. And so then the role of the chaplain then becomes someone who comes alongside those key adults that are already in their lives. Yeah, so thanks, Vicki, for that comment. Matt, I hope that answers your question, at least gives you a beginning way of thinking about how we think about chaplaincy. Any other questions? Thank you so much, Cassandra. We really, really appreciate you being here.
Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording. It does not stop the questions, just gives us a chance to chat without the recording on any longer.